California and Maryland to protest Donald Trump's election. Meantime, Trump's campaign manager and chief spokesperson Kellyanne Conway says it's up to the president and Hillary Clinton to denounce the violence at these protests.
I think the President of the United States, Secretary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, perhaps others can come forward and ask for calm and ask for a peaceful transition and ask their supporters, which are masquerading as protesters now, many of them professional and paid, by the way, I'm sure, ask them to give this man a chance so that this country can flourish.
Let's take it to our political power panel. We've got conservative commentator Gina Loudon and Democrat strategist Danielle McLaughlin. First to you, Danielle. What do you think of these high school walkouts? I mean, the criticism is they should be in school learning, not doing protests.
Well, I think that part of learning and part of understanding the political process is the right to protest. We're talking about freedom of speech. We're talking about freedom of assembly.
Can't they do it after school? I mean, you're 14.
And frankly,
wouldn't any 14-year-old be like, yeah, I want to get out of school, right?
Yeah, no, and I honestly, I had a pretty strict upbringing, and I think my parents would be crazy if they thought I was cutting school to do this. But it is important that these young people are engaged, and we want to see this kind of activism. We want to see this kind of engagement.
Understood, but
matters.
During school hour, I get it. What do you think, Gina, of the president and Hillary Clinton not coming out and speaking against the violence at anti-Trump protests? What do you think, Gina?
Yeah, I think it's really sad that, the president would come out and speak about anything political at the drop of a hat. But some of these students are putting their lives at risk. Let's not forget that, Liz. There's been violence. These are riots in some cases. And so you're literally risking these kids' lives to make a political point and to continue to politically posture and divide. I would go one step further even than Kellyanne did. And I would say that they should stop. They should stop and listen for a second, Liz, at the message that the American people gave them. We are tired of the racial division that they used to win political elections. It didn't work this time. I don't think it's going to work anymore.
Yeah, to Gina's point, Danielle, it really is a time for unity. It seems like the Democrats are in disarray. When you hear the resounding silence on protests like this and riots like this from the Democrats, I mean, that's an issue. And to Gina's point, the silent majority stepped up and said enough, right?
I think that President Obama has shown us, by example, that the power transition.
But shouldn't he denounce the rioting?
Social Donald Trump. I mean, rioting, absolutely.
Donald Trump said stop attacking minorities. Shouldn't Hillary Clinton and President Obama denounce violence?
Absolutely,
okay.
But not the freedom of speech.
I hear what you're saying. Trump says there is a double standard for protests. Listen.
We just had an election, and sort of like you have to be given a little time. I mean, people are protesting. If Hillary had won, and if my people went out and protested, everybody would say, oh, that's a terrible thing. And it would have been a much different attitude. There is a different attitude. You know, there's a double standard here.
Gina, what do you think? Is there a double standard?
There is an absolute double standard here. Let's not forget that a couple of weeks ago, the whole narrative coming out of the left was, would Trump and his supporters accept the vote? And now that things didn't go their way, they come out completely hypocritical and say, oh, well, we're not going to accept the vote. We're going to cause riots in the streets, and we're going to just go sit idly by while students endanger their own lives in some sort of political protest that is really all about nothing. Mr. Trump hasn't done anything to upset anyone yet. He just was elected, for crying out loud. So, yeah, there is a total double standard.
Danielle, I like your reaction to this. Donald Trump basically said on 60 Minutes he wants his supporters to stop harassing minorities. Listen.
Do you want to say anything to those people?
I would say don't do it. That's terrible, because I'm going to bring this country together.
They're harassing Latinos, Muslims.
I am so saddened to hear that, and I say stop it if it helps. I will say this, and I'll say it right to the camera: stop it.
And the Southern Poverty Law Center says it's documented more than 300 racial incidents so far since the election. What do you think, Danielle? Is that enough? We have also Paul Ryan saying there's no place for this.
It's a start, but it's not enough. And I think part of the protest and part of the confusion here is that Donald Trump has taken about 12 different positions on immigration, from mass deportation of 11 million immigrants to a slightly more, frankly, much more moderate approach, really which looks much more like Obama's immigration plan than anything
Meaning
else.
criminals.
Yes,
illegals, yeah.
prioritising criminals, leaving hardworking people, leaving children who were born here, or excuse me, who were brought here as very young without any, because their parents did it. We don't really know. I think this part of this protest is uncertainty. What is he going to do? How will he bring us together? Talk to us. Don't just say stop it. Give us a plan. Explain your positions clearly. And I think there'll be a lot less consternation. And I think, frankly, Donald Trump's a moderate. And I think there'll be less concern about his actual policies than the fear about the what ifs.
Gina, your final thoughts on the comments that Donald Trump made.
First of all, Mr. Trump, President-elect Trump, never ever discussed deporting immigrants. It was illegal immigrants, and I think that's a really important distinction. Secondly, if you want to compare the numbers of actual arrests made for actual assaults on people, let's look at the victims that are Trump supporters that have been injured or hurt simply for wearing a hat or because they looked like they might be a Trump supporter. The real hatred here comes from the race baiters, and that is not coming from the right, and that's not coming from Mr. Trump's people.
Enough is enough. Time for dialogue. Time for everybody to start using their inside voice, and time for peace. Thank you, Gina Loudon and Daniel McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.